My name's Jill Rowe, and in this episode of the Different Podcast, I talk with Steve Chalke all about blame. We can all jump to blame so easily, and we find it hard to take responsibility when we've done something wrong and say sorry. Blame is a shortcut. In this episode, we pay attention to the power of self-reflection, self-awareness, self-compassion, and the decision of forgiveness. This was a super honest and we hope helpful conversation. There's plenty of joy in this one too. Hello, Steve Chalke.
And hello, Gillian. I know I shouldn't call you Gillian, and it's not even your name, is it?
No, we said that last time.
I know. So I'm reminding myself.
Yeah.
It's just,
Just
Cornelia,
straight,
my
plain,
wife,
ordinary.
always calls me Stephen.
And I've noticed she does it particularly when she's slightly annoyed.
Which she often is, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later, as it turns out. Stephen. My mum used to call me Stephen as well. But now
It's when
my
you know
mum's
you're in
died
trouble.
and it's only my wife that calls me Stephen, which is why I call you Gillian, though I know it's not
Hopefully
your
I'm
name.
not in trouble.
Did it make you feel a little bit got at, though?
Yeah, just for a moment.
Which is what we're going to talk about.
We're going to talk about blame, aren't we?
We are.
Yeah, because, let's be honest. I've noticed this in myself, that it's really easy to jump to blame, isn't it? It's so much easier to jump to blaming others when things are
As
wrong.
I was saying to Cornelia just the other day. There you go. When she said Stephen.
Yeah, it's like it's a human habit, isn't it? We actually really struggle with not doing this because it's like this defense mechanism kicks in, like I have to blame someone else for something that's gone wrong because it's really uncomfortable to own responsibility for my part in what may have gone wrong.
And we have a very self-centered worldview, at least I do. So I know all of my motivations. I know what I'm planning. I know what I'm thinking. And it really annoys me that other people can't see that.
Yes.
That's particularly my wife. So, I mean, that's
yeah.
true, isn't it?
Yeah,
we begin with ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to get beyond ourselves.
We begin with ourselves and we want to protect that, don't we? So what do you do? How do you know when you're in blame mode, Steve?
How do I know?
Yeah, what do you hear come out of your mouth?
Well, I think that what happens is you get very defensive for a start.
Yeah.
So Cornelia said to me the other day, what did she say? She said, who left all those things out on the kitchen table?
And there's only the two of you.
It's only me and her that lived there. So I said, I don't know.
Steve.
I said, I don't know. Who did? Was it you? But I had the sneaky suspicion all the way along that it was in actual fact me. In fact, as I've thought about it, I realised it was me. But then it's very hard to say it was me.
Yeah.
So
because of that thing.
I said, I'll clear up for you if you like.
Steve, that's so naughty.
But then she looked out the window and said, who parked the car on the other side of the road?
And you said...
That was me.
Yeah, that's where the parking space was.
When I went to fill up with petrol last night so that you didn't have to. Kind of like,
Can I just say, I feel like this has turned into a marriage counselling. I was on the train early this morning and so I went to Birmingham and then I came back quite quickly, not because of anything wrong with Birmingham, but I was on the train back and there was an older couple sat across the carriage from me. And from the moment they got on, all the way to London. So what's that, it's about an hour and 35 minutes, isn't it? All the way, just bickering. And it was about the man, this is an older gentleman, had made himself, only himself, some sandwiches and not his wife.
And she was upset.
She was very upset.
And what was his defence?
He said, he made up my point is, he made up every excuse under the sun. And I wanted to lean over and go, just say sorry. Like,
couldn't he give her one? Did he have more than one?
She did. He did offer her one, but she was angry by then.
She wasn't having it.
Do you know what she did? No. She went down to the buffet, got something. But it was like this. It's much easier when you are responsible for getting something wrong, like to just make up every excuse possible to make it not about you. So everything that was being said, he was like pushing it back on her, pushing it back on her, pushing it back on her.
And as they say, everybody who's not married is trying to get into it, and everybody is trying to get out of it. So then it's going
Yeah.
In other words, I mean, that sounds very negative, doesn't it? It sounds like I wish I wasn't married to Cornelia, which I do. It's a joyous thing, except when she tells me off for parking the car on the other side of the road. But no, you're absolutely right. You tend to blame one another, and I think you tend to blame one another when you're tireder.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're tired and you feel you've had a bad day or it's all gone against you, and then you tend to take it out on
whoever's nearest.
Yeah. That's what I do.
And then you see it translated up, don't you, at like a community-wide level or something. And it is much easier then if you translate it out of how we are one with each other, and then you take it to a community level or a society level, and it's way easier to blame the immigrant community, or it's way easier to do that than take responsibility and go, actually...
To blame the Conservatives, to blame the progressives, to blame the Liberals, to blame the traditionalists, to blame to blame a different ethnic group, etc., etc. Blame becomes a huge thing.
Yeah.
Until, of course, you get to know a Conservative or they're human beings.
Yeah. And so you're discharging like a frustration, aren't you? That's what's really going on. Whereas if you just take a moment and go, oh, actually, what's really going on in this? Why am I blaming people?
Yeah. There's this thing, which I often talk about and may have talked about before to us, it's called false moral attribution theory. And it basically is a theory that says this, psychological theory. When I make an error, it's because I'm tired, or because I got a headache, or because I've had a bad day, or because I'm hungry, or because I need a break, or because, all those kind of things. When you make an error, it's because you're a bad person.
You're an idiot. Yeah.
And that's a strange thing, isn't it? So we apply a different set of rules to others than we do to ourselves, rather than self-analyse on one hand and allow others the liberty that we allow ourselves.
And there's courage needed, isn't there, in admitting, actually, I put my hand up. Yeah, I shouldn't be blaming others. I should be owning it. There's also that thing around cognitive. I'm going to bandy around some fancy words because you're very good with fancy words, Steve. But, that the thing that you struggle to hold two truths at the same time, don't we, in our heads? So, I always use the example of you're driving your car, but you're not really concentrating. And someone... You almost hit someone who because you're not concentrating, but you notice on the other car that there's some dents and some bumps and some scratches, and you're like, what a rubbish driver they are, it's all their fault. But actually it was you that wasn't concentrating. So you create and then you start to embed a narrative, which is you're right, everyone else is wrong.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So going back to Cornelia, she always says to me, the more stressed I am, the more tired I am, the more overwhelmed I am, the more stupidly I behave. And she's got a point, though I don't like to admit it to her,
Yeah.
I think it's important that I don't admit it, don't you think?
I I'm not even going to answer that question.
But there's a great truth in that. Well,
Yeah.
there is a great truth in it, because I know it's true. The more stressed anybody is, the more stupidly they behave, the more the rash things they do, the more the things you say become those that you've got to eat your words on and apologise for, etc., etc. It's when your emotions override your judgment.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That happens a lot. I do think, however, one of those things I always think is strange. You know, you get those kind of famous people who are on an interview on the telly or wherever, and they're asked if they could have their lives over again, would they change anything? And I'm always astonished by the people who say no. I do everything as I have done. And I always think about that. I kind of understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
If they're saying, through all my struggles and my pain,
I've worked
I've learned through that. Yeah. And so, although I've had some pretty bad episodes, I think they've helped me. So if they mean that, then that, I agree with that. But I always think, my go-to place is when someone says that, I always think, if I could go back to this morning, I would have toned something differently. Yeah. I would have got in that text message. I would have chosen to say hi to that person and paused and thanked them for something, etc., etc. So there is a sense in which we blame others. And there's also a sense in which we can become bound up with blaming ourselves, isn't there?
Yeah.
Constantly blaming ourselves for what I didn't say and what I didn't do and how, what I didn't give.
Yeah, and so part of it is to live with self-compassion, isn't it? Like to...
Self-analysis and self-compassion.
Yeah.
Because there is a great thing in self-analysing, isn't there?
Completely. Well, I'm into that, Steve. So, but if blame... So what I think is interesting, what you're saying, I think blame is a shortcut to taking response when we aren't taking responsibility. So if I think about when I get into blame mode, it's because I'm reluctant to have perhaps a necessary conversation, or I've got better at that, but there might be a reluctance in there. So blame is like a shortcut. It's much, much easier for me to say, oh, that's Steve Chalke, than it is for me to go feel the difficult emotions and then sit down and have a cuppa with you and thrash out a challenge or whatever. But I think there is a massive thing in here, just even in what you were saying about being people. We all have agency to take responsibility, don't we?
Yes, we do.
For our actions. And
it's very hard to do that, isn't it? I think in a lot of relationships of all sorts, that never happens, that honest sitting down and that honesty about what I feel and what you feel and how we deal with that without blaming each other, just acknowledging this situation. Because I'm a vicar, of course, I do quite a lot of marriage counselling. People come to me, they want to get married, and I used to do endless amounts of marriage counselling before I'd sit down this couple that were deeply in love with one another and say, now you're going to struggle with these things, and let's talk about them.
They didn't believe you.
No, they didn't believe me, and then I realised it was an utter waste of time. So I am not a very good marriage counsellor now, because I just say to them, there's no point.
Yeah.
I know people go, oh, there is a point, but no, there's no point. And I always tell them a story, and it's a story about the same couple who came to see me years ago. Yeah. And I was trying to explain to them that they might find difficulties in communicating and blaming one another, an argument. And then I realised they were sat so close to each other on this settee with their arms wrapped around each other. They looked like one person with two heads. They were and I realised they were at the stage in their relationship where they'd sit up most of the night discussing the colour of the wallpaper that they were going to put in the toilet or something like that. So I realised it was at that moment, actually, that I realised this was all an utter waste of time. Yeah. So what I say to couples now is I chat to them about their relationship and that, but I say, there's this moment, isn't there, when you are deeply in love with one another.
Infatuated.
Yeah. So, of course I'll marry you.
Yeah.
It's not my job to take away the freedom of your agency, as you say. But why don't we meet in 6 months' time, 6 months after the wedding, and we sit down and just have a drink together and talk about how it's all going. And
at which point you get to do all the counselling.
Yeah, exactly. Because then people have landed. They've come down to earth. And they're beginning to see that there are issues, and you can't go around just blaming one another. No. And you know, I think people enter into a long-term relationship with a desire to change the other person. I say that because I know I did that with Cornelia. I mean, I'm not joking either. Yeah. I thought that I could slowly mould her into being a much better person than she was, which would involve her becoming a lot more like me. When I think
oh, my gosh.
No, and I say it as though I'm laughing about it, and I am laughing about it. It's true. But I think that she also entered into our marriage blaming me for not being her, and not, and the great liberation comes when you stop blaming the other person for being who they are and you start celebrating who they are to allow them to be them. So I'm not trying to change her.
No.
Although I still think she'd do better.
Oh, my gosh. That's so bad.
No, the point is, it's letting go of it, isn't it? And stop blaming a person and work on yourself instead.
So to that point, everyone likes the idea of relationships being free of blame, and but most of us are reluctant to do the hard work or take responsibility. So the other week I was talking to some people in our office and there was some litter on the floor in the kitchen. I expressed some frustration at the litter on the floor in the kitchen. And a couple of people said to me, well, we didn't drop it. And just walked back out.
Yeah.
And that to me that's like a blame thing. But when you're trying to build a community and you're trying to strengthen, just do stuff, I think it's, you just take responsibility, don't you?
Yeah.
The adverse, I think, to blame is responsibility.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I didn't, but hey, I'm going to pick it up anyway.
Yeah. Strangely enough, I had a conversation with somebody just last week who told me they weren't going to do something because they were a leader. Honestly true.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's true. I'm a leader. I, therefore, will not do that. My job is to lead, not to do this. And
you said?
I wrote to them, actually, and I said, you are a leader, and I lead a bit too as well. And I think that I've learned, or am learning, that leading is about taking responsibility. It's about seeing that the job gets done. It's about being the person that does the stuff that no one else wants to do. That is what leadership is. They're better than the things they said to me. And again, it's, when I'm stressed, when I'm overloaded,
absolutely,
I say things that I later regret. They wrote back to me with a kind message. In other words, I realised I was getting out my box because I was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It's that thing about, the brain and the fact that our neocortex, our frontal cortex, manages all our emotions. Yeah. But the tireder we are, the weaker we are, the more overwhelmed we are, the more overloaded we are, what happens is we blow the circuits basically, and our neocortex goes offline.
Yeah.
That's what actually happens in your brain. So that's why you lose it. That's why you
Flip your lid.
switch.
Yeah.
That's why you get, and that's why you regret it 45 minutes later and think,
like,
why on earth did I say that and do that? And is there a way back? It's because that's what's happened. Your circuits were blown. Your prefrontal cortex goes offline. It's overwhelmed. It's like, fuses are blown. And then when power is regained, you don't know what to do about it. So it's that point when you're calm again that, it makes sense, doesn't it, to go and say, I really am sorry. No, I did leave those things out on the table, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got some stuff to do when you get home tonight, right? So to that point, Stephen, we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. That's why being able to forgive is so important in this, isn't it? Because it gives you that ability to make that fresh start when there's been that kind of... Because blame is quite toxic, isn't it? It spreads.
And forgiveness, that's a really good point, because forgiveness, of course, isn't an emotion. No. It's a decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a decision. And so when people say, well, I can't possibly forgive him or her or whatever, that's often they're saying, emotionally, I'm still wound up in this.
Yeah.
And the decision to forgive is the decision to not hold this thing that you might still feel emotionally wound up about, to not hold this thing against a person.
So it's like literally a mind thing that we're...
Yeah, the tough decision to turn your back on the wrong that you feel has been done to you or done to someone else and move on. And I think that, though that's hard to do, it's essential. And I'm not just talking theoretically, of course, because I, like everybody else, I could sit here and tell you a dozen stories off the top of my head about people that I felt really wronged by in all sorts of ways. And you have to, in the end, let go of it, move on, and make the decision to forgive.
And sometimes
you can't forgive and forget. Forgetting's harder than forgiving.
Yeah. It's also a bit of a bonkers thing, isn't it, that whole... But do you find for yourself, Steve, that you have to keep coming to that decision and going, no, I choose to forgive. I choose
to forgive. I choose not to hold this against a person. I choose to befriend them. I choose to engage with them. I choose to move on. I choose to, whatever the choice is. Yeah. But it's the choice to put that out of your mind and not allow it to impact you. And to not to do so becomes a cancerous thing. Yeah. It becomes something that eats away at you. Yeah. It niggles you. It consumes your thinking. It distorts your thinking. Yeah. So in the end you think, well, if I'm going to behave like this, I'm the only one that's
suffering from this.
Suffering from this. I'm going to let go of it. I'm going to move on.
So blame is a human habit. We find it perhaps the easier thing to do, but really the better thing to do is to lean into the challenge that we're kind of trying to deflect when we're blaming. We need to go towards the difficult emotions that there are in that.
Yeah, and have the difficult conversation.
Yeah, admit that we got it wrong. Yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah,
and then this act of I choose forgiveness. I choose to forgive. I choose to let go. And there's that quote, Alexander Pope, isn't there? To err is human. To forgive is divine.
To forgive is divine. To forgive is to echo God's forgiveness of me in the first place. Because that back false moral attribution theory, when I do things wrong, it's always because of the circumstances. When you do things wrong, it's all because of who you actually are. And yet I realise, obviously, that's stupid when you think about it. So I'm in constant need of forgiveness.
Yeah.
And
so do you say to yourself, it's okay, Steve, there's a fresh start? Do you
I do.
I have a bit of a narrative in my head to just like live in that, like as a truth.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, Jill, you've messed up.
Yeah.
Everyone messes up. It's okay. You're forgiven. Move on. Just learn from it.
Yeah. And this will give away when we're recording this, but the other day I was watching the Pope's funeral, Pope Francis' funeral, and it started with one of the cardinals just praying a prayer, asking for God's forgiveness. And he said, I am someone who's screwed up. I have messed up. I am not who I want to be. I come to you as a sinner, speaking, asking for forgiveness. And I thought, you know, that can be, and sometimes is criticised by people because people say, you know, the church is constantly putting people down.
Telling people you're bad.
And I guess, I know that's sometimes been the case, but I didn't think that of this. And I thought, it caused me to think about it again. There's real health, isn't there, in acknowledging your own flaws, failings, weaknesses, stumblings, sins, and saying, I'm owning up to that. I'm not trying to push it away. I'm not the person I want to be. I'm on a journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you can start again and start again. Yeah. To err is human. To forgive is divine.